Tzadi Tet is where we have Ein Vatl Isur L'Chadchila, and here we have various distinctions. Okay. Let's just see the Shulchan Aruch. All right, so it says, I'm in Tzadi Tet If Hey, yeah? Ein Vatl Isur L'Chadchila, Va'afilu Nafal L'toch Heter, She'ein bo shi'ur levatlo, ein mosifin alav. So there's two things. There's mevatel lechatchila, throwing it in. We talked about this, right? And then there's once it's in there, ein mosifin alav. The difference between ein mosifin and ein mevatlin would be, if just let's remember what we were talking about last week, is that the ma'aseh is less nikar if it's mosifin. If you have a piece of nevela and you throw it into a tarovet, that's a maaseh which is nikar. But if it already fell in by itself, and you're just adding potatoes, so I'm just adding potatoes to my chulent, of course my intention is maybe to mevatel the isur, but it's not, the maaseh itself is not nikar, so that's already, that may be different, or it certainly deserves separate mention, and that goes to what the problem with ein mevatel isur l'chadchila is, right? Whether it's we're afraid of the totza'ah, or we don't like the maaseh, right? Yeah? Does it sound familiar? Yeah, okay. Okay, so ein mosifin alav heter kedei levatlo. Avaru bitlo, o sheriba alav, either one. Okay? Im b'shogeg mutar, so the tarovet is mutar. Im b'mezid asur la mevatel atzmo. Okay? Im hu shelo. V'chein l'mishin itbatel bishvilo. Okay, v'asurim l'mochro gam ken l'Yisrael acher shelo yeheneh mima shebitlo u'l'shar kol adam mutar. So you have this issue of which we talked about. If you mevatel it in order to sell it, you don't have somebody specific in mind, right? So that does Rabbi Akiva Eiger about it, right? Over here, okay. All right. The dafka shinitarev yavesh biyavesh, or afilu Rama says, or afilu lach belach. Lemanda amar she'ein omrim bo chaticha naset nevela. Aval chaticha shebala isur, lo mahani shinitvasef achar kach heter. Daha amrinan be chaticha naset nevela. Right. So the shogeg doesn't help you if it was chanan. Okay. That's because this is halacha l'maaseh. He has to take a concept which is theoretically does not belong here at all, but but practically speaking, you have to know that just because something was mitvah safe, it doesn't mean that b'diavad it's mutter, because if you had chanan in the meantime.
Practically, this seems to eliminate most cases, most potentials for ein mevatel isur l'chadchila.
If it's min b'she'eino mino, and it's la, right? Okay, but you could have it in cases of yavesh, right? And you can have it in min b'mino, right? Nevela mixed with kosher meat, even if it's cooking, is min b'mino. So right? Okay. V'yesh omrim shafilu b'makom de lo amrin chaticha naset nevela lo mahani haheter levatel elam nitvasei kodem shenoda hatarovet avalim noda hatarovet kodem lo mahani ma shenitvaseif achar kach. There was this idea that a shame isur is nikra hatarovet, so you can't be mevatel it afterwards. Okay. Isur shel divrayim. This is what I want to concentrate on more, which we didn't get to last week. Seif vav. Okay. Isur shel divrayim. Ein ma'arvin oto biyadayim kedei levatlo. Ve'im asakein b'meizid asur. So an isur d'Rabbanan is different than an isur d'Oraita. Okay. So isur d'Rabbanan, biyadayim you can't. Aval im, and that's the same as doraita, of course. Aval im nafal me'atzmo ve'ein beheter kedei levatlo marbe alavu mevatlo. You can be marbe in an isur d'Rabbanan, okay, according to the mechaber. Okay, v'yesh omrim. So then obviously you have to know what an isur d'Rabbanan, what's an isur d'Rabbanan, what's an isur d'Oraita. Okay, but v'yesh omrim de'ein levatel isur d'Rabbanan. Olo sifalav. You see, the language is always double. Right, they're very careful. Ein levatel isur d'Rabbanan. Olo sifalav. Kamo be'isur d'Oraita. It's the same as d'Oraita. Ve'ein l'shanot. Okay. Isser to do it L'chatchila in terms of the Ma'aseh, where we say there, even the Machaber says that it's the same, the Isser D'Oraita and Isser D'Rabbanan is the same. So that I can understand if, in terms of if what I don't like in Bitul Isser L'chatchila is if the Torah, and now I'm adding, or Rabbanan, said something is Asr, you shouldn't make it mutter. When they say something is Asr, it's an emphatic statement, in a sense. Right? Not only that it is Asr, is that it should be Asr. Right? It's almost like a moral type of commitment. Right? So that's why Milachatchila, to take the Isser itself, that's Asr. Okay? Now, if it's Nafal Me'atzmo and Tamimar Beh, so you don't have that emphatic nature that you're violating anymore, because it's already b'tarovet. So here the only issue might be, I don't like the consequences of bittul. Right? What are the consequences of bittul? This depended on how we understood bittul, but if you take it again as the flip side of Davashesh Matirin, what we're saying is that even after bittul, the Isser is still there, so I don't want to be somech on that lechatchila, right? Because the Isser is still there. So then the question arises, and this is where it's very, very interesting, is the nature of Isurei D'Rabbanan as opposed to Isurei D'Oraita. This is a very theoretical question, but it has to do with how I relate to the whole business. Right? Because the difference between Isur D'Oraita and Isur D'Rabbanan is not only, or may not only, right, be in the level or the severity of the Isser. That's certainly true, that an Isser D'Oraita is more severe than an Isser D'Rabbanan. But it might be that the nature of the Isser is different. Okay? And what do I mean by that? There's a lot of Achrona Shetayra. I was debating, I didn't have a chance, I was going to send you some real Achrona Shetayra about the difference in Isurei D'Rabbanan and Isser D'Oraita. There's a theory that says, this is found in Rabbi Yosef Engel, the Asvin D'Oraisa. Anybody here for the Sefer? Atvin D'Oraita? It's called Asvin. He called it Asvin D'Oraisa. He lived in the end of the 19th century. It's the book of Yeshiva Shechakiras. It's a great Sefer. Actually, Reb Chaim's Bar Mitzvah Drasha is in there also. It's the same. He said it before Reb Chaim. But anyway, it's like, anyway, so he has, it's like one of the pieces that he has is he discusses his idea that Isurei D'Oraita are Isurei Chefza and Isurei D'Rabbanan are Isurei Gavra. And he throws that idea around. He wants to see whether it's true. What does that mean? It's a very interesting idea. When the Torah says, don't eat nevela, the Torah created, whether this is metaphysical or not is a whole separate issue, but the Torah created a status of nevela. This object is a nevela, and it's asur. That's what's called an isur chefza. But if Rabbanan came along and said, this is nevela mid'Rabbanan, right? Or this is chametz mid'Rabbanan, right? Or it's sha'ot, which chametz is asur mid'Rabbanan, or this is gvinas akum, right? And it's asur mid'Rabbanan. Whatever is d'Rabbanan you're talking about, let's not at this point distinguish between different isurei d'Rabbanan. Why do you have to listen to that? If Rabbanan said, don't eat chametz misha'a revi'it, when the Torah says misha'a shishit, let's say, right? So why do I have to listen to Rabbanan? Where did they draw their authority from? Well, you should know this, right? Lo tasur. You have to listen to Rabbanan, because the Torah said you have to listen to Rabbanan, right? So that's the chi of Gavra. Rabbanan do not have the power. Only God. This is like, if you talk about the metaphysics of brisk, only God can create a chefza, right? People can only create Isurei Gavra. Why should you do it? Because you have to listen to what I said. But they can't transform something which is mutter into an object which is asur. They can just say, this thing which is mutter, I'm telling you not to eat it. As opposed to when the Torah tells you this is nevela, so God can create, that's only in the divine realm. God can create Isurei Chefza. People can only create Isurei Gavra. That's not the way he puts it, but fundamentally that's what he throws around. Okay? It's a fascinating thing. I'll send you the piece from the Asvin D'Oraisa. Now this might have ramifications for what's going on here al pi halacha. Because if the only reason you can't eat an Isser D'Rabbanan is because Rabbanan said you can't eat it, but there's nothing in the chefza itself, as opposed to Isur Doraita, where the chefza itself is Asur. So then, if what I'm talking about is, you know what, I don't like the outcome of Bittul, because the outcome of Bittul is that even though you have a chefza shel Isur here, I can eat it. So I don't like eating an Isur chefza, even if the Torah says I can eat it. But that's only true in Isurei chefza, if it's an Isur Doraita. But in Isur Rabbanan, there is no Isur chefza. Right? So the whole idea of being mevatel Isur L'chatchila, because I don't like, or not being mevatel Isur L'chatchila, because I don't like the outcomes, I'm left with something Asur in a tarovet that I'm eating. If I'm talking about Isur Rabbanan, that's not the case. Right? So, in terms of the doing L'chatchila, so maybe there's room to say, Chacham said you shouldn't eat this, and you now want to eat this. Right? So don't do it. Don't take the Isur and throw it into the tarovet. But once it's in the tarovet already, and that problem falls off, and you're just worried about, but what are you left? You're eating an Isur b'cholzo? No, but that's not true. You're not talking about an Isur chefza, you're talking about an Isur gavra. So therefore, there's no problem with bittul Isur l'chatchila, at least in being mosif. Okay? So it has to, so I don't think he mentions this as a nafkamina, right? But it goes to how you understand the Isurei D'Rabbanan, and that's why, if you remember in the Rashba from last time, the Torah Tabayit, he has these chilukim about different types of Isurei D'Rabbanan, which is fascinating. Because he talks about Isur D'Rabbanan, which are Ikaran Midrabbanan, and Isurei D'Rabbanan, which are Ikaran Midoraisa. So there are really three levels of Isurei D'Rabbanan. Remember that?
Similar to what the Rambam has in Hope's Commandment about the different categories of Takana and Gezerah.
What are his examples there? I don't remember. Do they fit to the same thing?
No, I mean, by Minhag, the discussion by Minhag, that whether it's an Iker D'Oraisa, whether it's a...
by Minhag, okay.
Mishmeret to Mishmeret.
Right, okay. So here, so the discussion is, there comes that there are three different levels of D'Rabbanans. Whether we make the halachic distinction between each level is a separate question, but there are three different levels. There's an Isur D'Rabbanan, which is B'Yisodo Min HaTorah. It could be an extension of Divrei Torah, or a Chash because of an Isur D'Oraita. And then that could be, for example, maybe Chametz B'Sha'ah Chamishit. Not B'Sha'ah Revi'it, B'Sha'ah Chamishit. Maybe Gvinas Akum, or the Shach and Klali Sveik Sveika. If you went through all of Klali Sveik Sveika, you know this, right? That he says that Gvinas Akum is Atuch Shash Isur D'Oraisa, because if they were Ma'amid B'Kevat Nevela, so then it would be a Isur D'Oraita, but since we don't know, so that's an Isur D'Rabbanan, right? So that's a D'Rabbanan which is a Mikoro B'Doraita. Then you have D'Rabbanan which has no Makom in HaTorah. You talk about the Tilas Yadayim for pot. It could be Israel, or I'm trying to think of Machalot Asurot of D'Rabbanan that don't have a makor in the Torah. Nothing comes to my mind. I don't know. Let's say, if you want to say Stam Yena, I'm not sure if Stam Yena was meant to, maybe if it's Atu, the Isra Avodah Zarah of Nisuch, then that is Makor Min HaTorah. If it's Chasnos, because if it's Chash of Chasnos, then at least in terms of the Chefta, it's not Makor Min HaTorah. Whatever, but let's say something that doesn't have a Makor Min HaTorah, maybe is Stam Yenam. And then you have a third category, which might be like a Zecher Ba'alma, and that could be the din of Truma and Chutz La'aretz, or with Truma and Zalach of Truma and Aratzot HaSmuchot, right? So that is Chazal Mitakein, not because of any chashash, but it was just a zecher about, like Sfira Sa'omer, a zecher, what the Gemara says, that zecher l'mikdash ba'alma. Right? So therefore, the dinim of bittul Isur L'chatchila might be different, right? So that's what the Rashba talks about, right? Hinei shlosha minim b'bittul Isurim, echad Isur shel Torah, and that is whether the shear is shel Torah or if the shear is already D'Rabbanan. See, that would be a D'Rabbanan, right? If it was already Batal Min HaTorah, so now the Isur is on D'Rabbanan, but you still treat it like an Isur D'Oraisa, because the Yesod is an Isur D'Oraisa, so you treat it more Chamur. Vasheni Isur Shel Devreim Sheyesh Lo Ikar Min HaTorah, Hashlishi Isur Shel Devreim She'en Lo Ikar B'Doraita. Okay? Now, why are these distinctions relevant? It might be that how we treat them goes along the spectrum of what we were talking about. Do I treat it as an Isur Chefza? So I might say an Isur D'Rabbanan, which is B'Yisodom Min HaTorah, that I treat like an Isur Chefza. I could still say it really is still an Isur Gavra because I only have to listen to it because Chazal said, because Torah says I have to listen to them, but what they said you have to listen to is they said treat this as if it's an Isur Torah. That's one type of takana. That's one type of takana. Okay? We're making this Isur D'Rabbanan, but the Isur D'Rabbanan is treated like an Isur Torah. And then it would have all the chumras of Bitul L'Chadchila. Whereas an Isur D'Rabbanan, which has no Ikam in Torah, so there I might say that is only an Isur Gavra. That there's no, put it this way, there's no stigma on the object. Right? In other words, there's no Isur on the Chefza. Right? There's no stigma on the object. So therefore, the dinam of Bitul L'Chadchila would be more kal, and I could be most. Or maybe even those Isur D'Rabbanan, I say no. Rabbanan can create Isur Chefza. Right? Rabbanan are like Malachei Asharet. They can, or not only can God create Isur Chefza, but people can also create Isur Chefza if they want. Right? But when they make a takana, which is Zecher Ba'alma, so there they didn't create an Isur Chefza, and there you can move out to L'Chadchila. Right? So that's that sheet in the end of the Rashba that says that Trumas Chutz La'aretz is different than everything else. Okay? So this is very important. Practically we don't do Trumas Chutz La'aretz, but I think it's very important to understand the difference between Isur D'Oraita and Isur D'Rabbanan, not only in terms of the level of severity, but the type of the prohibition, and to see that it does have ramifications for Bitul L'Chadchila, and for other things as well. There's another area, which is actually Halacha L'Maisa, comes up. There's a shita, right? Let's talk about milk that comes from a treif animal. Okay? Why is it usher to drink camel's milk? Anybody want to venture? Why? Because it's gross? Why is it? Arabs drink camel's milk, I think, no? Why is it us to drink camel's milk?
Is that a chaya?
What?
Is that a chaya? A behemoth? What is a camel?
Camel
It's
is
a behemoth
tamei.
tamei.
Yeah, it's a behemoth.
It's a behemoth tamei.
So you're not allowed to eat chalav of a behemoth, right?
That was my question. Why aren't you allowed to eat the chalav of the behemoth tamei?
The Isur is lo tevashel gdi. We learn from the.
That's right. So that's
from the Torah that it's lerabot chaya behema ve'of, and it's behema kshera.
right. That's the isur basar b'chalav. I'm not talking about basar b'chalav now.
Yeah, but it's in the context. In other words, we learn about chalav. I would say we might learn it from basar, about isur of basar b'chalav.
So that you're saying that you can
Or anything
drink
that comes
chalav from a behemoth tahora, and ipso facto, therefore you can't from a behemoth tamei.
Or naturally, anything that comes from a behema tahora.
All right. So there's a makor for that.
Mutar.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, kol hayotze min hatamei tamei. That's the halacha. Hatmeim, right? Tmeim hatmeim tmeim lehim lachem. So whereas a limud kol hayotze min hatamei tamei, right? It's not. You're not over. Oh, so this is the point. You're not over an isur lo ta'aseh. If you eat camel's meat, right? You're over an isur lo ta'aseh. That's a behema tmeah. Okay. If you drink camel's milk, you're not over a mitzvah lo ta'aseh. There's no malkot, right? You're over an isur aseh of hatmeim kol hayotze min hatamei tamei. You're just not. It's an isur aseh. So here there's some shita that there's no din of tam ki ikar on isuri aseh. In other words, on I don't know what this would do with the sheet of Chabad by Chalav Akum, but in a Ta'arovet, Chalav of a behemoth tmeya or Chalav of a treifa is not asur, because the din of tam ki ikar was only said on lota, on isurei ma'achalot, which are asur below ta'aseh. But isurei ma'achalot, which are not asur below ta'aseh, do not have the din of tam ki ikar. Why? Where do they get that from? Because you learn it out either from Nazir, it's going back to when you weren't here for that, right? But it goes back to Nazir, which is an isur lo ta'aseh, or to B'liat Kelim of Klei Midyan, which is isur lo ta'aseh, Right? So that's the technical thing. But conceptually, there's something very interesting which is being said here, that only on Isrei Lo Ta'aseh do you have Isur Chefza. Hatmeim l'rabot, the chalav, that kol hayotzei min hatamei tamei, if it's not an Isur Lo Ta'aseh, maybe it's not an Isur Chefza. And the halacha is, the only say tam ki'ikar and Isurei Chefza. That's just an interesting thing. That's an interesting possibility. I think the Noda B'Yehuda holds that way. It's quoted in the Pischei Tshuva and Tzadichet. Okay? So you have another application of where it's important to know whether something is an Isur Chefza or an Isur Gavra. It does have ramifications. So you could say, what difference does it make? It's Asur. It's true, it's Asur. But it's Asur in a different way, and there could be nafkaminas. Okay? Okay. All right, so that's what I just wanted to talk about in terms of.
So all of the dinim that might be that are chal on a chefza. Okay.
I'll send you the piece from verse from the last one Doraisa. He talks about it in terms of Nadar. The Gemara makes a distinction. Talks about Yisrael Chefza when it talks about Nadar. Okay. All right, Basa b'chala. Ready? Okay. Let's. You want to take a 5-minute break? Should we take a 5-minute break? All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll get a drink of water, and then we'll start. Basa b'chala. Yeah.